Hi, thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to be working on another of these 10 by 12 canvas boards, and I'm going to be using some of this textured paste pre-prepared to make something interesting. And those of you who watched my last video, and you'll see the picture in the corner, I used an outliner which I found quite difficult, so I've actually made my own using quite loose acrylic paint in a tube, and so far I'm finding it's working very well. These are bright colours I'm going to use today. British summertime's been pretty rubbish up to now, so I felt like I could do with something bright. And I've also treated myself to a new ink, which is a purple shade. First of all, I'm just going to coat this board with a good spray of my fluid and water mixture. I'm going to put the paint straight onto here and then start to blend them from there. So you can see I'm being quite liberal with them, and I'm starting in the centre with the pale yellow, brushing it around with quite a decent sized soft brush. It's about an inch brush, and just blending in, and I'm moving outwards and just going to cover. While the paint's still wet, I'm pulling it out with this nice flat palette knife and also adding in some darker colours towards the edges. I want this to be an interesting picture, so I'm now just going to smooth out all of these colours, and I'm just going to add in a little bit of white on the far edges so that it blends. And this big flat soft brush, which is about a 3-inch brush, just takes off all the hard edges and makes it blend really nicely together. So I just give it a good sweep across the top. Okay, back with the palette knife, and I'm adding a few more colours now, and again softening up with that broad brush, just pulling the colours out. Now I have to say this looks quite bold, and we've got colours sort of around the edges. It's going to look better as we get going. So now I'm going to add the texture paste, and I'm using the medium-sized palette knife, and I'm going to start in the centre because that's where I want the main focus of it, and I'm just going to work it outwards and just keep doing the shapes that I want roughly, and I will go back in. It takes quite a while for it to dry. But what I do want to do now, I want to scoop out some of this in the middle, so I want to make a sort of almost like a bridge effect. So I'm just pushing the wet paste with my knife to get to sort of sculpt the shape that I want. And now we're just going to leave that to dry overnight. Okay, so we're nicely dry now, and I'm playing with these two inks. There's a crimson red and the new purple one. I'm going to probably use the white as well. So first of all, I'm just going to give it a bit of a spray just with clean water, and I'm going to drop this sort of crimson pinky red just in a few dots in this centre. This really is a work in progress, and it will evolve and develop as the time goes on. There are always things that you find that you do that you think, maybe I need to change that, and that's okay, that's part of the process. And especially with abstract work, it's very much intuition led, unless you have a very clear plan to start with. Now I'm just going to put 3 drops of that beautiful purple, I think it's called Purple Lake, and I'm using that lovely spatula, the silicone catalyst spatula, just to pull it into the cracks and the little grooves in that texture paint. Those are the areas that are going to hold the paint afterwards. And now I'm pulling outwards from that area, again using the spatula just to make some different shapes, mixing the colours. The white, I've put a few drops of the white in, which has helped. And then I'm actually going to go in under that paste with the colours that we've used to start with and just add a little bit more intensity. Again, I want it to be sort of a starburst effect. Okay, so I'm using the soft brush again now, and I'm going to work around adding the colour and then softening that down with the silicone palette knife, using white paint to soften. This is all about the process of using acrylics. The first time you put the coat on, they're quite often harsh. So then the ideal thing is to go in and just soften. And here we are. Okay, it's looking interesting. I'm just going to let that do its thing. The ink's still very wet, so they're running a little bit. And a little bit more pink in there. It's starting to come together, But again, it's a question of just keeping adding little bits. There's some of the white ink going in there. The white ink will make your other colours opaque, so that's always worth remembering. Okay, now let's talk about the ugly stage. Every painting I've ever done has gone through that, and this one is no exception. It's got places where I've put a little bit of burnt sienna ink, which I'm not that keen on, and that's okay because we've got the base colours in where we want them. So now it's a question of adjusting and working. And I'm going to start using this fan brush. The fan brush is great because it spreads the paint very easily, but also gives you sort of loose edges. And you can work with the full brush or work with it sort of sideways if you like. So working in with this brush now, I'm going to soften down all of these colours. I'm still using exactly the same colours as we used before, but I'm actually mixing more white in, so it's softening them down. It's giving them less harshness and it's blending them a lot easier. If you've ever wondered about how you get a good result, it's really about blending with acrylics. Okay, so I'm a lot happier with this now, but I'm going to use the small palette knife to put a little bit more white in that area. It was looking a little bit like a bird's head. And then I'm just going back in with that brush, that lovely fan brush. This is a proper fan brush for acrylics or oils, not a watercolour brush. And just keeping on pulling and moving the colours. And now I can add a little bit more depth into that centre because I want that to be the sort of middle of that. And now here's my lovely, lovely paste. This is white, titanium white acrylic paint just squeezed directly into this tube. And it's a soft tube, so it's easy to squeeze the paint out. And I'm going for a sort of cracked effect. Obviously you could use different colours. I've just stuck with white for this one, and I'm just going to add little lines, little bits of edges, and once this is dry it will stay raised. I've trialled it on another piece and it does work. So now I'm just going to go intuitively where I feel I'd like to have these breaks and just start adding these lines of interest. It will highlight little areas of colour and it will just give a little bit more context to the background by adding something in the foreground, which your eye will look at. And taking it right out to these edges here where we've put that texture paste on the corners, and I've sort of just joined them up and just pulling it across. It's completely just what feels right, but I'm also putting it on the edge of that texture paste which is raised, so it works really well to highlight on those areas. And as you can see, I've just speeded this little process up so you can see where I've added those lines, how I've put them in, and the sort of effect that we're going to get, because that's going to dry now and then we're going to go to the next stage. So here we are with a small soft brush, and I'm just going to wet these areas here and I go back in with the ink. So here's the purple ink, and as you can see I'm working into the cracks, into the lines and into the little pockets that have been created by the texture paste. It will highlight and give depth where you've got sections that are raised, and you can put darker colours around, will make the lighter ones pop. So again, it's just going in, adding a little drop of water, and I'm applying the ink to the tip of the brush instead of dropping it in, and I'm watering it out and just adding that water to soften, as you would with a watercolour actually, and it just pulls that acrylic paint, that acrylic ink into lots of different areas. The more water you add, obviously, the softer the colour becomes. So you can intensify or you can soften. And it's working very effectively. I'm liking what it's doing so far. The paint has dried, the raised paint has dried, so it's acting as a barrier. I know that the ink's not going to go past that, so I'm just going to keep working on this and adding colour. This is the purple, but I'm also going to add some of the scarlet colour as well. So exactly the same procedure, a little bit of water, and I'm going to use some white on this area because I want it to almost look frosted. And this is a white ink that is quite opaque, but obviously the more water you add to it, the softer it becomes. So it's pulled out. You can see where it's stronger, where I've actually dropped it in, and softer softer at the edge. Just popping it into lots of different areas. I want this to be quite intense at this point here. And it's really looking interesting now. You can see how the sort of interest is forming with the lights and the darks. Without having the darks, the lights don't stand out as much. And dropping the water in here and tilting this, you can see how the ink is running. And again, it's almost looking frosty as well. I'm really enjoying this, but I'm going to continue adding a few more bits of purple and just putting it into places where I want it, and I will show you how it works out. And here we are. I'm quite pleased with this, considering I hadn't a clue where it was going when we started. It's quite effective. I like the colours, and I love the way that the paste in the tube has worked. It really does add interest. I've put a little bit more white over the tops with the texture, and you'll see I put an extra line in that wasn't there before. It just needed joining up with that corner. I hope that this will inspire you to have a go mixing the paints and the inks, and I will look forward to seeing you very soon for another project. Many thanks for watching. Keep painting, and bye for now.